Russians attack and break through Ukrainian defenses. Why the war in Ukraine? There are numerous developments from the east today. Russian forces conducted a number of offensive actions in the Luhansk region in an effort to degrade Ukrainian offensive capability. The major objective is to persuade the Ukrainians to move their artillery systems away from Zaporizhzhia and Bakhmut in order to relieve pressure on the southern Russian defense. The first and second breaches of the Ukrainian defense occurred close to Kupiansk, while the third one occurred close to Torske and Novoselivske. These improvements were all effectively localized. The fourth attempt by Russian forces to break through the front line was recently successful, with considerable results. Even while the Eastern Group of Forces spokesman said 2 days ago that Ukrainians had finally stopped the Russians in this area and had the upper hand, recently, things once again spiraled out of control. A little forest in front of Zaporizhzhia became the Russian forces' initial objective. Geolocated video demonstrates how Ukrainians were shelling the Russian-taken forest. In front of Karmazynivka, a small forest was chosen as the second target. Geolocated video demonstrates how Ukrainians moved to the next locations on the line as they withdrew. After seeing some initial success, Russian forces made the decision to go all out, redistributed numerous artillery pieces, and began pouring infantry into the area. Russians were able to expand their bridgehead and launch their offensive from Kovalivka because Ukrainians were forced to retreat from one small forest after another as a result of the intense and severe artillery fire. Even when they only saw a few men on the ground, Russians reportedly opened fire from multiple launch rocket systems, according to Ukrainian fighters. Rapidly approaching Novohorivka, a small settlement, Russian forces reportedly managed to capture it, according to some sources. At this point, Ukrainians began to localize the breakthrough and finally adapted to the circumstance. The village of Novohorivka was passed from one owner to another numerous times, according to certain sources. In essence, the fighting is for the tree line. It just so happens that there is a village there because Novohorivka only has a few houses and had 36 residents prior to the war. Russian soldiers created a new frontal axis from Rayhorodka as soon as they learned they were losing ground. Geolocated video reveals the Russians are heavily firing the nearby tree lines and a small forest. Ukrainian forces left Nadia and Serhivka due to the possibility of being captured by a pocket. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, they have already taken control of 3 communities and collapsed the front line. Only when they can be used for logistics do settlements have value. The good news is that these 3 Russian-conquered settlements, Serhivka, Nadia, and Novohorivka, each have a population of only a few houses and had 20, 25, and 36 inhabitants before the war, respectively. As a result, they do not in any way aid Russian logistics. Consequently, the only worth of Russian positions is their tactical usefulness. Furthermore, if we examine the topographic map, we can see that Russian forces have taken up a number of positions on the strategic heights and are attempting to push along the ridges in the direction of the main Ukrainian defense line that runs up the hill. The good news is that as long as Ukrainians hold this hill, they will be well positioned to fend off Russian attacks. Additionally, because Russians must cross the river, Ukrainians should take advantage of the fact that Russians are mostly deploying infantry rather than many vehicles because this will give them an advantage. Once more, this is an ideal situation in which to use cluster munitions. In reality, it was only 40 kilometers north of Kupiansk that a previous Russian advance in the Luhansk region was stopped by heavy cluster shell fire. According to the most recent information, Ukrainians have managed to stabilize the situation near Karmazynivka while keeping Rayhorodka's status fluid. Today, Ukrainian soldiers drove Russians from Nadivka, while Russian forces persisted in their drive. This information was corroborated by several Russian analysts, who asserted that the Russians were forced to retreat due to the challenges of maintaining positions in the lowlands.